in fact, let's see, the 10th anniversary of a reading that we did here at CONvergence many years ago called Giant Lizard Theater. And an interesting idea behind Giant Lizard Theater then was a chance for many of our poets and our artists to present work which, frankly, took on various themes of giant lizards in our lives, whether literal or metaphorical. So this could be anything from dinosaurs to dragons to the ancient Naga of Southeast Asia to Godzilla to Komodo dragons, whatever it was that people thought was interesting. And so, unfortunately, none of the original artists who had performed with me that particular evening weren't able to join us tonight because they've been actually doing some very successful things. And one of the artists who had performed with us back in 2005, it was Samuk Devonsai, who you might remember just a couple of years ago in 2013, brought to stage her, I always love saying, award-winning play, Kung Fu Zombies versus Cannibals. And now, mind you, I always thought you should have had a few more giant lizards in there along the way to mark that passage and journey, but so it goes. It's like, it wound up being this dystopian society involving a conflict between humans, cannibals, and of course, zombies who for some reason or another knew Kung Fu. And this was actually an exciting point because, let's see, there was what we would refer to as kind of this culture of non-expectation in the community about what might happen if you let allow artists actually have the stage. And she acquitted us admirably and beautifully. And at the same time, I always look back at it fondly here simply because for me, 10 years ago as well, it was one of my first major readings in the community, and particularly within the science fiction and fantasy community. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that as an audience members, you were all very receptive to the ideas, much more back than a lot of the mainstream venues at first. And for me, it's like, I went in a lot of different directions. I became the first Lao American to receive a fellowship from the National Endowment of the Arts and Literature. I also went on to actually have my work presented at the London Summer Games. In fact, as a cultural Olympian representing the nation of Laos. And that was actually an interesting experience because there was a South American artists collective and where they did this process called a rain of poetry, and they had this helicopter which just took poems from all the represented nations, and they just dropped them over London. It's kind of like I'm just going. Well, on the one hand, this is really something that I never really thought I'd see, but on the other hand, it's like, and so they're just dropping my poems along with everyone else's all over the streets here. I'll take that. But just to say, it's really cool being here at CONvergence and being back with many of you who've been a part of that. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about our format tonight, about what we're going to try and do just the same here. As many of you have heard me talk about it time and again. Orwell, that master of dystopia, once famously said that a poetry reading can be a grisly thing. And that puts me into a position of some complication there, simply on the grounds of, well, as a member of a horror writers association, shouldn't it be kind of grisly? But so I've come to terms with it that it should be grisly for the right reasons here. And so tonight I'm going to share a couple of poems here, both from 10 years ago and some of my newer work, and at the same time this is also a open mic format too, so many of my fellow members from the Science Fiction Poetry Association are here tonight, and they'll be sharing some of their award-winning work as well as some newer pieces that I understand have been composed just for this occasion here. So it's nice to see that kind of creativity has been inspired. We'll also be announcing the 2015 winners of the Riceland Award, which is in the science fiction and fantasy community, the highest poetry recognition that we have in the field today. So I'm very pleased that we'll have that. So Does that sound like a good game plan for everyone?
Yes.
All right, and at some point here, we may also have just random miscellaneous surprises and or prizes here as well, so keep your ears open, all right? So, all right, I'll tell you what, we're going to do this as a, let's see. Now, we'll do this as a special request inquest, but I'll start off with the poem, Destroy All Monsters. Destroy all monsters. Ishiro Honda once said, monsters are tragic beings. They are born too tall, too strong, too heavy. They are not evil by choice. That is their tragedy. When the orders came, we were not, could not, dared not be surprised. Humanity must be preserved at all costs, despite a decidedly checkered record since the biased jottings of Herodotus. That is the old line, safe to stand by, a leaf of litmus on which to write our strategies, like old Sun Tzu. Monstrosity and terror have no place in our crumbling streets filled with graffiti and youth who are the heirs to our creations. Whether you are a lizard with a skyscraper between your toes, or some smaller fiend in whom we fear to find too close a mirror, there just isn't enough space in this vast void, this vast world, for both our dreams. If only we could truly believe you'd be content on some distant menagerie, instead of plotting where to bury you beyond our sight. Song of the Kaiju. Through foam, through surf we rise, dark waters parting as our Titan's foot breaks the shore. Armies rise against us with a roar, guns flaring in the night. Our cause, our fears, our fight is for historians alone to decide. We fierce combatants have no time to reflect on our footnotes remarks. In raging moments, fists become claws, our small tails lost beneath the crushing weight of epic bloodshed. Cities toppling amid the screams, so out of touch with time. Turn back, turn back, turn back, you mighty beasts. But deaf ears mark our reptilian hearts that sag and sigh within our wake, trampled upon the world's stage. This isn't Shakespeare. We are no Moors, no witch-doomed Scots we know. Our loves are not the songs of poets, or they rise to a fever beneath these scales, following our instinct. Man-made hurricanes, mad as typhoon, filled with the simple potential of half an atom. The moth. Tiny princess, you arrive with your songs of the future already set in motion. An island, your world. My world, monstrously sprawling by feet of fiber, cinder block, and steam. Whose is more fragile when the fearsome wings of a lost forest moth are enough to reduce my home to rubble with a wave from 1,000,000 miles away, in the time it takes to witness a single butterfly kiss. The big G walking. Lumbering, lumbering, our scaly tread, our thunderous might, massive as mountains, an inferno of times converged, chaos gone atomic, made flesh, our uncertain allegiance no more complex than a Kosovo night, a Somalian dream, Sandinista memories fading through a starlight scope. I am a Cold War child in an era of fallen walls, broken promises, empty buildings, and vast oceans poisoned without warning. I am a hunted visitor in the corridors of your making, a mirror of your future, your friend, your foe, leaving for now, but never forever. And finally, Kaiju Haiku. Atomic Titans. My children smile in the dark, yearning for your toys. All right. And I'd like to actually now call to the stage Ruth Ehrman, who is going to be sharing a few pieces with all of us. Ruth, would you join us up here, please? Everyone, warm.
Here's a poem called Science Fiction with Apologies to Marianne Moore's Poetry. And this has a little bit of background. Stephen Wilson wanted to do an anthology of poems, not parodying famous poems, but taking off from them to go into a science fiction or fantasy context. And I thought, well, I could do Marianne Moore's poetry. That would be fun. I could write science fiction instead of poetry. And then I'm sad to say, Stephen Wilson died. He didn't get this anthology published. And his associate said she thought she could still get it published. And I sent her an email note saying, would you mind if I withdraw and offer it for publication, because who knows how long it'll take for you to get this anthology published. She said, don't withdraw, just offer it for publication elsewhere. If it gets published, then when I get the anthology, I'll be republishing it. Anthologies can do that. So this is science fiction with apologies to Marianne Moore's poetry. I too dislike it, the claimed vast expanses of space viewed from the claustrophobic confines of a spaceship, where they feed on pills or powdered concentrates, or at best grow food in hydroponic vegetable gardens, where they have no room for trees, and even each stretch of grass, being inedible that gets allowed, must pay its way, renewing the ship's oxygen. Oh, the stars, salting the dark universe with lights in many colors, and the planets we, assuming the invention of FTL, as SF mostly does assume it, or at least near enough for relativity effects to kick in. We'll discover and explore, or distant descendants, but that's an unpopular choice. So cryogenic sleep tends to get assumed, if FTL isn't. In the meantime, you must not expect to hug family or friends not there on board to crew the ship anytime soon. If FTL doesn't get assumed, we mustn't expect to see ever. But if you assume it, or if you explain how you assume it isn't, you are necessarily interested in science fiction. And here's kind of an oddity. This is a translation that I did recently. It's just come out this year. 2 18th century French fairy tales, The Prince of the Aquamarines and The Invisible Prince. And both these stories by Louise Cavalier have scattered through them assorted poems. And this meant that I had the challenge to translate it into English metrical poems, which meant that in English you're going to have to scan and rhyme. So here lies the epitaph that the princess writes for the unhappy prince of the Aquamarines. He's not dead, but she thinks he is. A fairy was her enemy. She condemned you to a bitter torment. One who looked on you for but a moment, never more the light of life would see. My dearest love, to see you live, my life I give.
Thank you. I'm always delighted that you're able to join us here. Ruth has been one of my great friends throughout these years. She's been so supportive of my work and the work of many of my very honest self. As you can see, she's a fine poet. Our next poet that I'd like to call up to the stage is Eleanor Iverson. She actually has many distinctions under her belt here, including the first recipient of the James Tiptree Award. And it's like I have so many notes about everything else, but she's won there from the Mythopoetic Award to the Spectrum Award and even the Homer Award, and just this is an amazing talent in our community. And as a resident of Minnesota, I hope that you take time to appreciate what she's sharing with us tonight. Everyone, please welcome Eleanor.
I am probably going to be the least good reader tonight, and that's life. So Brian told me he needed poems about giant lizards. And I was sitting down in the bar, and there was one of these really obnoxious ads on TV which showed a happy white, it was car, happy white middle-class family, you know, putting all the beach stuff into their car and about to drive off for their happy day at the beach. And the combination of that ad and Brian's need led to the following. A day at the beach. Leaving for a trip, the family does not expect to find huge lizards. Beach balls, a cooler, shovels, brightly colored towels. Last of all, lizards, not brought with, of course, peeking over the sand dunes, golden eyes blinking. Who will they eat first? Bobby building a sand fort, Nell in her cute suit, Dad knee-deep in waves, Mom under the umbrella, maybe the baby. The golden eyes blink, the lizard minds consider, soon they will decide. A day at the beach, golden sand, glittering waves, and giant lizards. How happy I was with that.
I came out wonderfully.
Did one other, which is a dinosaur poem, which I wrote many, many years ago when I first discovered that birds are descended from dinosaurs, which was a total revelation to me. All my life I had mourned the loss of dinosaurs, and then I discovered there were 10,000 species of living dinosaurs all around me. And at that moment I became a bird watcher. So this is a poem about this. Little did I realize that every summer breeze brings the sound of dinosaurs singing in the trees. And in the cool of morning, when dew is barely dry, the cousins of Triceratops soar across the sky. Triceratops is dead and gone, which proves the worth of might. Maybe we should put our trust in music and in flight.
All right. Well, again, one more hand for Honor, please.
I am so glad that I wrote that lizard poem. I can't tell you how
I
happy
am
that
too.
makes me.
It came out absolutely awesome.
I knew
It's
that
like
family was
fame.
I approve of it.
All right, so our next poet that we're going to be bringing up is Sandra Lindau. She's a wonderful poet. She's been presenting with me all happily all throughout CONvergence this weekend. Here, and I'm so grateful for her taking the time to when someone says we need someone to introduce this Lao poet here, it's like you'd be surprised how many people volunteer for it. But it's like she stepped up amazingly then, and she saw her this afternoon, and also many of you worked with her yesterday. Plus, we also have the poetry happening on Sunday. Do you remember what time that is?
12:20 Sunday morning, and I can't remember the room.
Right, and it's going to be a poetry round
One of
robin.
these rooms. I think it's Plaza 3 again, but I'm not 100% sure. But look for it at 12:20 Sunday morning, and then it'll be a round robin poetry reading. We'll just go, round one, and read until our time is up.
Excellent. Anyway, Sandy's also being very modest too. You were the 2011 recipient of the J. Green Award for poetry, weren't you?
I've won a lot of awards for poetry, including the best poetry chapbook published in Wisconsin in 1990.
Excellent. Well, that's how we'll actually segue into, ladies and gentlemen, please give her a hand as she shares some work with us.
Brian that in my 40s I wrote almost all about dragons and dinosaurs, and I wish that I would have brought some of them. But I have one dragon poem to read and one mythological creature poem to read. I grew up on a farm and went to 4-H fairs.
and this poem is called Green Cotillions. The Dragon Farmers of America, DFA, issues these guidelines for the sexing of dragons. 1. Dragon claws, like cheetahs, don't retract. Good for takeoffs and landings, but not for sex. Experienced breeders trim claws before sexual encounters. Mature, partnered dragons rarely injure each other, but the electric couplings of virgins can do damage, scars decreasing auction green book resale value. 2. In the month of melting snow, dragon breeders arrange green cotillions, handlers protected by black gloves and padded white kimonos bring dappers and debs together through opposite doors of local fairgrounds breeding chambers. Ceremonial claw trimming prior to breeding is ritualized foreplay. When claws are trimmed on matching red velvet pillows, the two see each other and the deb goes into heat, if timing and chemistry are fortuitous. 3. While members of the audience bid silently on options for offspring, the intended ones are released in the central lotus where they may tumble the air above a clean straw nest, mating weightless as sparrows, a fine show the first time. Older, heavier dragons become more circumspect, may refuse coitus in front of an audience, disdain reflected in golden eyes. 4. A pregnant dragon's called a dancer for grace in weaving a nest. The Future Dragon Breeders of America, FDBA, sponsor yearly competitions for Best Dragon Dance and Best Dragon Nest. 5. Dragons are not dinosaur descendant, but mammalian, furred, like emerald-winged platypi. They hatch their young from eggs, nurse them tenderly at breast, rising on wings of warm-blooded need, falling softly to incarnate rest. And the second poem I'm going to read is Waltzing with Windigo. And Brian's description talks about mythological monsters. And a Wendigo is a Native American monster that I imagine to look like a huge green lizard. Waltzing with Windigo. Once upon a time in a dark season, a child was born who had been touched by a Wendigo. Doctors said hydrocephalus and drained the spirit from her. But what do they know? The child grew slowly, like a reflection in pale water, a shimmering of what could have been, thunder and lightning lashing unexpectedly. But her mother loved her, and her lovely sister loved her, and the summers were warmer than expected, though the winters were very cold. And so time passed. But Windigo, who had grown big on the best of the child, still lived by a lake where the sister liked to dance, and it longed for that sister like a bowl longs to be filled, whispered to her in the voice of the white pine, longed for her even more when she whispered of a new love. Luring her and her love to the beach in winter when snow lay like a heavy silence, letting them lose themselves in each other's arms while an old Mustang kept them warm, swallowing them in the darkness of sleep, and when daylight came, the car was cold and they were gone. This is a story that is not fair. The child was still broken, the sister forever lost to her. Windigo takes what it can, and those who are not taken must endure. Some say Wendigo is starvation, but I say there is more than one way to starve. I lived by that lake the next year, a big bear husband, a blue-eyed boy, a dying marriage, a small white house with birch and birds, and when I saw Wendigo reflected in winter glass, I took the boy and did not return.
Thank you. One more hand for Sandy, please. So, how many of you is this your very first time coming to a poetry reading at a science fiction convention? Be honest. Okay. I was like, are we doing enough of a good job here that you actually consider coming to other future poetry readings at science fiction convention? All right. I will take that. I will take that. All right. So, again, part of it is that some people have often asked, Brian, it's like you're doing so much work in literature and in writing. Why specifically has poetry been, the angle that you took as the approach? And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that go into it, but I think particularly coming at it from an American perspective, it was that poetry, especially is one of those forms where we get a chance to experiment with language, to start really bringing in new traditions and new ideas into the community and the culture. And also at the same time, with science fiction, with fantasy and horror, I find that this is the form of literature and the arts that seem to be most receptive to bringing in the ideas of new communities, whether refugees, immigrants, migrants, and so forth. It's like you look at television, for example, and where were our first images of a multicultural universe, if not in shows like Star Trek, for example, where it imagined a future where even Russians at the time could be serving on the same spaceship as Captain Kirk or the Vulcans or Mr. Sulu. It's like, sometimes I think we're so removed from it now, even as Star Trek approaches 50 years next year here, we sometimes forget. This was a really transgressive idea at the time. It's like science fiction is where you saw the first example of an interracial kiss on television, which today, you can spot that all over the place. And this is where we challenge and change our ideas. And so with poetry, I think that's the issue and the opportunity where we really have a chance to make an interesting difference. And that's not to say that all the time you're going to see poems which, boom, nail it all the time, but it's where we also have a chance to do some of our best experimentation. And I bring this up just so that many of you also feel encouraged to try and bring your own response and your own. Think of it this way: when you have a novel, then that's a pretty deep, heavy commitment. On the one hand, and if your readership doesn't really connect with that, then it's like it can really set back in immigrant communities literature for a real long time. It's like they're not ready to be really part of the mainstream. But when you have poetry, for example, then it's like, well, you didn't like this one, but it's like, let's give another poem another shot. It's a pretty fast, quick thing that we cut and we start exploring all about. Anyway, I'm going to close that up with just an example here from my book, Demonstra here, which is based off of not so much a giant lizard as a giant amphibian. I hope you'll all let me stretch the interpretation of it.
Brian?
Yes.
No, that's fine.
I know. All right. So this is an entity known as Gopnyai, or the giant frog. And it was interesting as I was looking through our mythology and folklore that the way that we explained the lunar eclipse at the time was the idea that there's this giant frog that is constantly trying to eat the moon. And villagers always have to come out and bang their drums, shoot their guns, fire the fireworks off to chase this giant frog away. And of course, now it seems quaint and people kind of go, really? But here, I'll show you what we did. Gopnyai. Gopkindwe, or the frog, is consuming the moon, according to ancient Lao tradition. Beyond our waters, it's only a predictable eclipse. Carl Sagan would hate our demon-haunted world. Sagan has no use for the Lao Sun shaman in Ponsonba, who panics as ominous portents herald Gopnyai's return. because certain baleful stars align and dreams are strange. If our legends are true, somewhere between Champasak and Luang Prabang, hidden deep in a primordial cavern near the Mekong, he slumbers, an antediluvian entity, ever dreaming hungry, an Anuran astrovore, devouring luminous celestial bodies. Perhaps he thinks to gain precious immortality, to free himself from the bonds of earth and mere reality, to storm Mount Meru and feast upon the multiverse. Each time might be the last time, if not for humanity doing everything to dissuade fearsome fraud ambition. Towering above our lush jungles and hard mountains, he's selfish with his lunar appetites, an inconsiderate titan. His true spawn are terrible to behold, hungry for man in indifferent corners best left unknown. He's cowardly despite his corpulence, but over centuries, not a single concrete solution has put a final end to him. So, men, women, and children keep watching the skies, laughing nervously, taking nothing for granted, living loud and proud to protect the cosmos, ready should the worst prove true. This is where we're going to actually move into announcing our Weisslin winners, and one of them happens to be in the audience with us today, but it's like we're going to start off first with the list, and then it's like, you'll see we'll go with this. All right, how's that? So, as a quick preface, as I mentioned, the Weisslin Award was established by the Science Fiction Poetry Association as a means of recognizing each year the very best in science fiction poetry that had been, and fantasy and horror in genre overall that had appeared in various publications. And qualifications for this can vary here. It's like even self-published works can count as well, as long as it's very clear that it had been read and received well by a wide number of audiences. Is that correct, Jimmy?
Self-published is eligible at this point, yes.
It is still
It has to
eligible.
be actual.
But someone else has to nominate it.
But someone else has to nominate, exactly. But anyway, so the Science Fiction Poetry Association is a network of nearly 400 members who are writing at professional, semi-professional, and amateur levels around the world. The Science Fiction Poetry Association has members in Australia, in Ireland, in England, in Canada, Mexico, France, Italy, and in the United States. So this is what I think you should always realize is recognized as an international award here. And so anyway, with that preface out of the way, in the, we'll actually be reading each of these poems tonight. In our first category of short poems, our winners were, in this particular order, in the third place it was a tie.
Four-way.
Oh, was it a four-way? That's
Yes.
right. Yes, okay. So, we had Short Forms by David Klink, I Imagine My Mother's Death by Brian Dietrich, Extinction by Joshua Gage, and After the Changeman Incantation by John Philip Johnson. In second place was Ruth Berman. Ruth, stand on up. And also in first place was Shutdown by Marge Simon, who's down in Florida, so she couldn't join us at the moment here, but hi Marge, it's like, we're here, and congratulations for Shutdown. In the long form, however, in third place, David Klink's The Perfect Library was the third place recipient. Six Things the Owl Said by Megan Arkenberg was second place, and in the first place, F.J. Bergman's 100 Reasons, which she'll be sharing with you tonight. So that's our winners for tonight. Everyone give them a hand here. And let's start with hearing the winners here. So let's see. Oh, I am going to take on After the Changeman Incantation by John Philip Johnson. Here. All right. This one's for you, John. And also you're in the room and you haven't introduced yourself. No?
Alphabetical order by author.
I figured.
Short poems first.
Yes, okay, and also, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Weisman Anthology. Each year, if you're a member of the Science Fiction Poetry Association, rather than forcing you to go hunt down all the nominees, we actually nicely collect them into a really awesome collection for everyone to read through and just evaluate. And so it's a great piece.
Copies are available for purchase here tonight.
So, After the Change with Incantation by John Philip Johnson. To become a goose had seemed important earlier when he made the change. A gray goose, for some reason, fat, with the ability to lift above the archer's arrows, fly past the leafless autumn trees, and cross the bowl of the mountain valley far beyond those peaks. There was a mission to get something, or to return with someone. Some reason to be a goose, other than just gooseness. Other than filling your wings with sky. Hands drop the wine. Feathers cannot pick it up. We forget when we change. We become something else. Things mean differently. You circle the great alpine woods, forgetting. There below, knotted in the trees, were the plottings of men. Creatures like little gods, with their endless violence upon things. They make such noise. They wail and bleed. It is no place for a goose. It is no place for one who can find north and south within his body and know which one to choose. Let's see, Sarah, can you give me a hand on this one here? Let's have you read Extinction by Joshua Gage.
This is after George Bilger. I sit on the surrendered beach at twilight, the best hour to catch them, just before the sun glissades behind the horizon, and there beyond a distant wave is a humpback whale. Megaterra nova anglia, I guess. Nova anglia. A triumph of water breaching like the moon. But I am lying. There is no whale. There cannot be a whale. There have been no whales in these waters for decades. This is a whale-free world, a planet all whaled out, thoroughly de-whaled. I just want an excuse to whisper whale, which, as we all know, happens to be among the top dozen softest words in the English language, whale. So, as an ecological service, I rise to the whaleless tide within earshot of the Massachusetts Turnpike and its cathedrals and tunnels, quietly praying the word whale.
That's nice. Thank you. And FJ will do the reading for our second place winner. Out of the third place.
One of the four-way ties for third.
I Imagine My Mother's Death by Brian D. Dietrich. I imagine my mother's death. It is curiouser than I thought. It wears a waistcoat and gloves, a great gold watch on a proper chain. It wears a beaver hat. It is worried about being late. My mother's death does not smell like carrots, or little girls, or rabbit holes. It wanders white chapels, back alleys, the market's blackest shadows, black as baby carriages. It knows how to cut meat, how to lure its prey with the promise of money. Sex, strawberries. It smells of strawberries, and only faintly formaldehyde. My mother's death puts on its gloves and goes out for the night. It finds a woman walking alone in the dark. It hails her like a cab, enters her like a cab, offers to help her paint the town red. She agrees, wanting a way out, a waistcoat perhaps, a gold She dreams of carrots and rabbit holes, craves even the maddest of hatters, someone to call her queen. When it is done with her, it wipes its knife on the bib it has brought, then goes in search of another. They are all my mother.
And the last of our ties for third place, Short Forms by David Quick. I dream I am on a parallel earth where they do not use any short forms. There are no initials, no contractions, no abbreviations. My computer stopped working, so I buy a new international business machine. I log on. Someone sends me a joke, and I find myself rolling on the floor, laughing my ass off. Later I go to a party where everyone wears polyvinyl chloride. It was one of those kind of parties. One woman tells me she uses self-contained underwater breathing apparatus while diving a barrier reef. Her favorite poets are Edward Eston Cummings and Thomas Stearns Eliot. I tell her my favorite authors are Herbert George Wells and John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. I find that I miss the ability to be brief, but contractions give us more time to get to know each other. I want to return to my world, where there are lasers and radar, a world where there is the promise of an FTL drive, a world where you can write a letter that ends with P.S. I love you. And now, Ruth, will you share with us science?
I did read it already.
Oh yes, well there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Sandy, it's like you have the honor of being the stand-in for Marge Simon and her first place poem in the short category.
Marge wrote to me and asked me to do this, and she says, "Thank you so much, Sandy, for reading this poem on my behalf." Okay, and so I thank all of our members who voted and am deeply honored. I was talking to Bruce one afternoon about how terrifying it would be if a faction like the Tea Party people took over and closed the libraries and banned reading material they had not altered or approved. It could be much like the scenes from Orwell's 1984, and off I went to write this poem. And then she said, I need to tell you this, that's actually happening. Tea Party tried to close, libraries in Texas and get rid of all of the references to homosexuality in the books. That happened last week. So this isn't too far in the future. I was so pleased that Michael Bailey picked it for his fantastic anthology, Qualian Noah's, last year, and it also won an honorable mention at Baldecon Poetry Contest. And she says, with winning the Riesling topped it all off. I hope it resonates for years to come. So this is called Shutdown. They barred the library doors today. Men in uniform stand patrol, armed and ready, their lantern jaws firm, lips a straight line. Stoic women, also armed, jog up and down the block, buttocks moving like pistons. Someone dashes from a building, a handheld reader clutched close. Shots are fired. I don't stay to find out more. I packed the car with books, little room for else. It is my car, his gift to buy my silence, to make up for the bruises, real and otherwise. Never marry a politician who has no use for literature, has no use for a wife that does. Eagles have left their nests to vultures. Barren palm trees whimper for their loss. There are ceaseless storms. Mud is everywhere, while two-legged insects multiply unchecked. The car radio plays Ibsen, bassoons herald patrols. I roll down the window, taking a deep breath. Outside Peer Gynt's Hall, the Mountain King, foreboding notes of the oboe, a palpable stench of fear. Am I leaving that or taking it with me?
So in our long-form poetry category, David took third place with The Perfect Library. So we seem to have a theme going on here in science fiction poetry this year. So, A Perfect Library, for Carolyn Click, after Patrick O'Leary's The Perfect City. Imagine, if you will, a perfect library, where the reading room is lit by the soft pulsing lights of fireflies, and the wood that furnishes it is from exquisite trees felled by mountain men with bulging biceps. Where you can find the fold-out book of universes in newspapers, including Barsoom Evening Post, The Fanciful Times of London, The Atlantis Monthly. Where you can find dictionaries of made-up words, the histories and alternate histories of things that never happened, the Book of Extinctions and Lost Civilizations, the Book of the Living, and the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Living Dead, where the reference desk is staffed by ancient librarians with leathery wings who can tell you about the Big Bang and everything since because they were there. A perfect library where the books read other books and join book clubs, arguing what they're about and what they've done, that they can shelve themselves. Where you can find books smaller than a fingernail and larger than a bus, where the listening room has pillow headphones handed out by flapper girls sporting steampunk goggles so you can hear the music mountains make, a pent-up frustration of dormant volcanoes, the budding awareness of spring moss growing on the side of trees, the stirring of the planets. A perfect library where documentaries are available in a screening room with reclining bucket seats and fresh buttered popcorn, and drinks are served by male models wearing gladiator and toreador costumes, where the photocopiers never run out of toner, paper, or patience, and never break down. Where the carpets are cleaned by pilot fish taking a break from Shark Week, where bathrooms are hands-free and fairies use the pressed leaves from gilded books to fan your hands dry. Where the map room has an infinite number of maps, and old sea serpents using walkers gingerly slip from the canvases to lead library tours, where the archives and special collections contain books that have turned to dust, and patrons are asked to wear white gloves. Refrain from sneezing. Where people in the quiet room can hear the buildings settle. I have not mentioned the mermaid swing, the petting zoo of extinct species, the corridors where classic lines float through the air like balloon help, a 2,000 years of cement exhibit, the crystal conveyor belt made from the wishes of children that appear out of midair, bringing the books you want, the dungeon of dead technologies, the wall of human existence, a glass tube ride through the sunken city. This is the library you dream about, a perfect library, and I can see you want to go there. You want to knock on its heavy oak doors and say, "Let me in!" And if you finally find yourself there, you will discover the perfect place. Past the reading room of exquisite wooden fireflies, past the guided tour, the swing, the dungeon, past the gladiators and toreadors and flapper girls, to a place where you have a view on the garden, the natural light finding its way in, and there, in a glass case, you will find a first library card you were issued, a first book you signed out as a child, and you are there with your parents again, a place where you could barely see over the counter, and you are glad you finally have a chance to thank them for taking you to your first library, a perfect library, and you realize this is where you have been all along. Next, I'm going to keep this short and do the poem by Ms. Arkenberg. Let's see. All right, which is 6 Things the Owl Said. Part 1. I remember having roots. I remember pushing my way, bare and raw, down into black soil, cold as ice, but never felt the kiss of sunlight in places damp. Heavy sucking in places dry and fragile as bones. Men and women passing above touched my petals tenderly, called me broom and meadowsweet, sucked my scent like water through thirsting nostrils. But I knew little of petals. I knew earth. I was roots. Part 2. What is a flower without beard? A flower without a story is a corpse. To drink water through a rootless stem is to suck through a slit green throat. What are 1,000 flower corpses bound together with string and enchantment? A gift for a lonely man? 1,000 dead flowers make a woman, and a beautiful woman makes a wife. A 3. A wife's body has 3 scents. The first is the scent of meadow spray, of enchanted hot wax, salt and musk, of bare skin and soil sun-warmed. The second is the scent of marriage, of smoke beneath a thatched roof, of running hounds, of bloody skins of deer, of charring meat on an iron spit. The scent that lifts its head at the sound of a hunted horn, eyes wide and daring to hope. The third is the scent of earth which only roots can smell. Every man can smell the first. Only 2 smell the second. And I alone know that the third is bare, deep, and out of reach. Part 4. My husband thought he knew something of thresholds. I cannot be killed indoors, nor out of doors. Did he not know that flower stems have walls as thick as castles, but roots have cells as close and safe as any convent? I cannot be killed on horseback, nor on foot. A flower either in the air, our soft and dancing petals always moving, turning with a world we do not know what it is to be at rest. Here, I will tell you the meaning of my husband's death. The riverbank is the water that sleeps deep within the earth, and only I have tasted it. The bath is the water that a married woman drinks through a slit throat. The billy goat is a husband who eats flowers, and over all this the arch that bears a thatched roof, watertight, is the name, woman, which renders your roots invisible. Part 5. Never trust in prophecies, spears, sorrows, egos, enchantments, thresholds, husbands, lovers, or love, but especially love. 6. I had almost reached the river when he caught me. Father, father-in-law, wielder of string and enchantment, he said to me, I will not kill you. I will make you rootless, winged. I will give you a woman's eyes, too big and beautiful to look upon the sun, and I will give you a flower's tongue that yearns for blood and rotting things. But never again will you touch the earth. Never again will you taste the dampness, the heaviness, the sucking soil. The other birds, the worm eaters, will drive you up into the branches, and your feathers, like a thatched roof, will cover you from the rain. I will make you what a woman is when she is beautiful, winged, rootless. And that was Megan Arkenberg, 6 things the owl said, in our second place. And now, we bring you, of course, to our long-form winner, F.J. Bergman, who has 100 reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her.
The idea for this poem was taken from the book 237 More Reasons to Have Sex by Denise Duhamel and Sandy McIntosh. 100 reasons to have sex with an alien. More than one tentacle. With suckers. I mistook the blaster in his pocket for happiness. He asked me what a being like me was doing on a planet like this. His ventral cluster was magnified in the side of my rocket. His ventral cluster was like a bouquet of blue flowers. I said, for me? He felt like a cross between Astrakhan and Curly Endive. I thought I was shaking his hand. He thought he was stroking my prehensile appendage. We both thought it was a diplomatic formality. We thought we were responsible for the fates of our respective worlds. I felt lonely because the universe was expanding. I felt small reassured because his presence meant we were not alone after all. The gravity field caused genital engorgement. The anti-grav generator caused dizziness. The solar wavelength triggered hormone production. The Coriolis effect made my senses swirl. Lit only by Cherenkov radiation, I still cast a spell. Such unusual sex toys, which he referred to as probes. When he unfurled his wings to stretch, I thought it was a mating display. I mistook his yawning for sexual arousal. I mistook his indifference for sexual arousal. I mistook his urgent need to micturate for sexual arousal. He mistook my sneezing for sexual arousal. He mistook my laughter for sexual arousal. He mistook my sulking for sexual arousal. He mistook my tattoos for a mating display. My piercings were highly magnetic. He thought my breasts were egg sacs. He said he didn't have any DNA, so I didn't have to worry about pregnancy. Parthenogenesis, on the other hand. I had had it with humanity. Not much else to do on an asteroid. We were both too far from home. The starlight was so ancient. He said he'd let me fly his spaceship. He said he'd let me play with his matter transmitter. He said he'd let me play with his matter transmuter. He said he'd let me play with his time machine. He told me he was a divine messenger, and I believed him. His silicon-based wings fanned my lust. His pheromonal signature was intriguing. His subvocal rumblings made me squirm rapturously. His buzzing vocalizations gave me a migraine, so I closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, he didn't have a name to remember. He looked nothing like my father. He looked nothing like my ex. He looked nothing like anything I'd ever seen before. I was ripe for mischief. The bubbles in his creamy center turned me on. His outer integument was my favorite color, periwinkle. His outer integument had a fishnet stocking pattern, and those things really turned me on, including the seam up the back and 9-inch stiletto heels. His emanations smelled like roast pork and cinnamon. I was hungry. I just wanted irregular sex. I'd never done it in free fall. He read my mind and knew exactly what I wanted. A myriad of moonlets intensified my longing. We were trying to establish each other's respective genders. I told myself it was my duty as a Terran citizen. I told myself it was my duty as a xenoanthropologist. I told myself it was my duty as a xenolinguist. I told myself it was the best available treatment for xenophobia. We slowly climbed out of each other's uncanny valley. He said he wanted to serve me. He said he wanted to eat me. He said he liked my Cthulhu for President t-shirt. I was hoping someone would pay big money for the videos of our encounter. Someone on his home world. He said he'd take me on a trip aboard his magic swirling ship. which had a really cool hood ornament. He said he'd take me 2,000 light years from home. He said he'd set the controls for the heart of the sun. He said his mother was a space lord. He said he was a time lord. He was way hotter than I expected. I had a fetish for long striped scarves. I had a fetish for the writhing of his ventral cluster and the plumes on his dorsal ridge. His violet eyes turned me on, all 15 of them. He said he was a famous rock star on his planet. He offered to let me make a plaster cast of his ventral cluster. He said he was a famous artist on his planet. He offered to show me his Rigelian sandworm excreta sculptures. He said he was a famous poet on his planet. I didn't believe him, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He said he'd come all the way from Rigel just to hear me read my poetry. He wanted me so much he put his spaceship on autopilot. He wanted me so much he didn't notice when we overshot our destination. The stimulating vibration as our vessel entered the atmosphere. I thought the ship would blow up any minute, and this would be my last chance. It was my last chance. Our vessel was about to crash. The smoke of our burning intertwined and rose up toward the stars. Because I lots of hats, we not only have Riesling anthologies here available for purchase, but my own chapbook, Starline, the journal of the Science Fiction Association, Poetry Association, which I edit, and the third hat is that I'm the poetry editor for Dark Renaissance Books, which has just come out with the first volume of an epic fantasy in verse, Round.
Which also involves giant lizards. All right.
It does involve a giant lizard, as it happens, because the first poem in the book is Interregnum, which won last year's Riesling Award for the long poem and has a dragon in it.
All right, so and that actually brings us to the end of our evening together tonight. And so as you heard earlier in the presentation, 12:30 on Sunday, we will be doing a poetry round robin here where if you feel inspired, if you have some pieces that you'd like to share, by all means, come join us here. It's like whether you're experienced, whether you're new, it's like we love meeting new poets and and new voices and visions here. It's like, again, I thank all of our people who were able to come tonight and who are also watching this broadcast. Let's see when it goes up online. It's like, again, just if I have any parting words for you as we mark, let's see, the end of Giant Lizard Theater here, it would just simply be to remember that poetry, and really any writing, any literature, isn't to be seen as just words on a page or sound hitting your ear. Always remember, it's about souls talking to souls, and that we must all work together to create and continue this great conversation. I look forward to seeing you all in the future, and in the meantime, I was like, enjoy and have a great convergence from that point forward.